of Arts and Culture's Art of Applying and Public Art Bootcamp information session. Just to make you aware that this workshop will be recorded, and later next week we will have this updated to our YouTube channel, and you can see the link below, or if you misplace this or don't jot it down, you can just go to YouTube and just search for Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, and you will find our channel. Before we get started, I just want to go over our office's commitment to racial equity. The Seattle Office of Arts and Culture commits to an anti-racist work practice that centers the creativity and leadership of people of color, those mostly impacted by structural racism, to move towards systems that benefit us all. We also acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land, the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. And again, I'd like to welcome you all again, and thank you for tuning in to our workshop today. And we have a great list of panelists who are here, and I'm going to just quickly introduce them to you. We have Pat Gomez from the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture, Sabina Haque is a visual artist from Portland, Oregon, and a boot camper from the last cohort we had in 2020, and then Hugo Moro, who is a visual artist and also a boot camper from 2017. And then I am also joined today by my colleagues Rebecca Johnson and Ricky Reyes. I'm Jason Huff, and we are from the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. Just some context about our program. So public art program for Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture is part of the 1% for Art ordinance, which was passed in 1973, in which the city was tasked with providing art opportunities for everyone. And so over the last 40 plus, or geez, 50, almost 50 years now, our program has worked to put art, the ideas and the work of artists out in the public realm, from parks to community centers to fire stations, and to provide these unique experiences. And in the almost 50 years that we've been around, we have nearly 300 artworks that are on display publicly throughout the city. And we also have about 4,000 commissioned artworks or artworks that we purchased directly that are part of our civic collection that hang in city offices. In addition to commissioning public art and purchasing work, our program also, we do temporary art installations, we do events, but also one of the things that we do is dealing with training. And as part of our equity goals, we are working to create as many training opportunities as we can through our public art boot camp, through youth training, just as we're trying to provide opportunities for artists who are coming from a traditional studio practice and gallery practice can move into the public realm. So about 20 years ago, sort of our office's first iteration of artist training started, and it was a fairly protracted program, sort of like similar to what boot camp is today. We're training artists, introducing them to projects around the city, meeting with artists, and then actually giving them a project. That program only lasted for 1 year, and then fast forward to about 2015, our office restarted that program and branded it under the boot camp name. And this time around, this iteration was done in larger workshops that happened on 2 weekend days. And it was quite an intense amount of work that went into it, as far as information that was that was given to artists and what was expected of them. And then that ran from 2015 to 2018. Then in 2020, we decided to also just sort of change the way we did the program, where the previous boot camp had about 40 to 45 artists within that group. They're in a range, everyone from people who are very serious into looking into public art to those who were more curious and interested in sort of finding out more information. We decided to sort of scale that down a bit and just bring on 12 artists for a cohort. And what we were going to do is have a year-long program to where we were going to meet with artists monthly and walk them through the public art process, everything from meeting with stakeholders and community members to developing concepts to eventually each member of this cohort created artworks. We're commissioned to do artworks at the end of the boot camp, and so we divided up where 4 artists within the cohort get opportunities at the Seattle Center, and here we have 3 of our artists from our last group with their installations, and then also part of our art interruption series that we do with the Seattle Department of Transportation. And I guess to answer the first question that's going to probably come up is yes, you can do augmented reality. One of our artists did it today. So just yes, so you don't have to ask that question later. But I think so this is our second year within this iteration. And the unfortunate thing with the last group, we had a pandemic that had just started. And so we had to do everything online. And this was one of the rare opportunities where the group actually got to get together. This was at a celebration at the Lake City Art Interruptions opening. And so hopefully for moving forward with this next cohort, we'll have opportunities where we can meet in person and help develop those relationships. So I think I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Ricky Reyes, who's going to talk about the call and what you all need to do to apply.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. And do you want to move
Actually,
ahead one more
oh,
slide?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're going to before we get on to the boot camp, we want to take this opportunity to have Sabina Haque, who was in last year's cohort, to speak about her experience with the program and sort of let you all know who are applying and what you could expect and what those experiences could be.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so my name is Sabina Haque, and I make multimedia installations. And when I applied, I had never actually done a public artwork that was actually outside on the street. So my work, this whole year was really informative because all of you folks are probably going to figure out how do you translate my art into a public art setting. So the monthly lessons that we learned, the project, there were project heads that came on, there were artists that came on that shared their expertise on fabrication to installation to community engagement. That was really helpful because you need to translate your art into public design. You need to be aware of like safety issues. So my work, eventually we went on a tour, which was in person during 2020, and we had to look at these bare sites around the neighborhood, and we were collaborating with the transportation department, and we were looking at different sites. I picked one site at one point, and then the transportation department was like, sorry, this is not going to work because we need so much space, ADA considerations, how much space do you need from the side of the road. So I moved to this site, which was near the library in Lake City, and this was the concrete space that I eventually designed with. So next slide. So the public art managers, Maya was my wonderful manager. They really help you walk through this process of like, not just designing the artwork, but actually the process driven public art. Like, how do you actually get permissions? How do you actually get an engineer to help support your design, for a volunteer fee, no fees. So it was a lot of information that we translated into actually making a physical art piece. I ended up working with community in Lake City, and I worked with some of the managers in the neighborhood association, and they were really great with connecting me with local establishments. There was an education group called Northwest Children's Site, and they connected with me, Somali neighborhood families, Indian neighborhood families, African American families. They had these Zoom groups that I just zoomed into and told them about my project. And can we go to the next slide? So one of the things that we were doing is I offered to paint and incorporate their story into the artwork. So I ended up needing about 55 people to participate during a pandemic. So I ended up getting more than 55 people to submit their photographs. And from there, I actually hand painted their portraits. I have painting as my training. And then I combined them into this lattice work. One of the stories that we knew about the site was that there was a Japanese-owned farm and a flower shop on that site. And one of the activists in the neighborhood that I was connected to and I reached out to. So it's always good to like talk to the neighborhood, talk to the community members, talk to the any of the people that are living around that area. They had worked a couple of years prior to change the name of 28th Street to Hayashi Avenue. And this young woman is the daughter of the Hayashi grandmother, Taiko, and she was born in 1926 on that very same land. And now her portrait, next slide please, is basically on that site, and her story is incorporated on that site. So you can see one of the participants who sent their photograph holding their portrait. And then I had to get this lattice structure that's based off of this beautiful gate. If you look at the very beginning, I had that gate which enters into the Lake City Library, which is right to the side of it. And I was using that motif, combining some of my historical designs with Indian lattice structures and Islamic architecture. So from start to finish, in order to get this permission to get these sculptures that stand 8 feet high, I had to really think about design issues. I had to think about how they were going to, so these are aluminum die cut. They're actually not that expensive to make. And then the printing process, of course, was a little bit pricier. One of the things that I would recommend is that, great job, Jason, changing the price to 10,000 for your art. We only had 7,000. I actually was able to scaffold the project to my community here in Portland and other places and get some extra money. So that's also a great thing. Next slide, and we're almost done. How do you get an engineer to help you? Well, guess what? Jason and the group has a wonderful presentation by a couple of different people about fabrication, a thing that I didn't really know much about. And I actually asked them, can I meet with you separately? And they were like, yeah, sure. And they comped me, they didn't charge me, and they told me what kind of wedge anchors I had to do. And, I looked really professional when I sat on the Zoom team and talked to the city engineers, and I had all these drawings and schematics. They're like, this looks great. Let's, pass this along. And my project manager was like, oh my God, that's never gone this well. I'm like, okay, so it's about communication, but it's also, you have a tremendous amount of resources that they're going to provide when you get in to this project. If you don't get in this year, I definitely suggest you apply next year, because what happened after that is Maya, my project manager, helped me to put an artist statement together and a letter of interest for the Oregon and the Washington public roster. I did both of those with her support, and I got into both public rosters. I just had an interview. I was a finalist for Lakeshore Community College. I didn't get it, but I talked to my project manager. He knows my work now. He's like, we love your project ideas. Thank you for participating. So there's a lot of opportunities. That project was 150,000, and I'm doing 2 projects in Portland right now for public art people. So it's really a jumping board. So this is a great opportunity. Work hard on your application and your visuals, and specifically talk about what your strengths are. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina, for talking about your experience. That's great. Hopefully, glad that you're moving on to bigger and better things. For those of you in the audience, just to know that for the latter part of this workshop, we'll be taking questions from the audience. And since we can't hear from you directly, but if you do open up your chat function. You can type in questions there. And if you have any specific question for one of our panelists, please put their name in there so we know who to address that question to. All right, so now I'm going to pass it off to Ricky, who will talk about the call on the program.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was great to hear. And I'm excited to talk to you a little bit around really the meat of what bootcamp is, what it's going to look like, and if you're selected, what the process of building this relationship together over the next year, and hopefully more, will look like together. But bootcamp is really broken up essentially into 3 different parts. So the first part is going to be 9 in-person or online workshops. I'll dive a little bit more into what those look like, but you can expect workshops on Thursdays and Saturdays where we'll really have an opportunity to dive deep with folks who are professionals in the public art field, ranging from folks who have deep experience creating a concept, folks who have deep experience reviewing concepts, all the way through to when you're installing and deinstalling your work. These workshops will be both open to the public, but there will be opportunities as a cohort that you'll have to dive deep with the speakers in a way that is just, I've heard, been really informative and really, really great just to build those relationships between boot campers and different folks in the field. The second part of it is going to be individual meetings with art mentors. So I'm one of them. My other 2 colleagues, Jason and Maya, will also be a part of the project. But these are really opportunities to take what you're learning broadly from these workshops and figure out how they apply to you, how they apply to your own art practice, and what it really looks like to get individualized support so that we can hopefully set you up for success as you are both learning these concepts, but also applying them to a temporary commission, as Sabina sort of mentioned, and hopefully similar to Sabina too, be able to support you in your career after this as well. These are meetings that will be scheduled upon selection on a one-on-one basis. So again, upon selection, you'll be reached out to. There will be a lot of communication between me, my other 2 colleagues, and to be able to build that relationship. And then the third part are really sort of the tangible hands-on experiences. So you have your workshops, you have your individual meetings, but we really also want to give you, by the end of this boot camp, a set of tools and a set of skills and a set of real life applications that when you apply to other calls in the future, you can really tell folks that you have really direct and tangible experiences with. So, again, you'll end this boot camp with a temporary commission, but we'll also invite you as well to be panelists for future projects. So you can see what that part of the process looks like. Again, you'll be able to meet with and sort of know the names of different design team members, different city staff reviewers, different community members who will hopefully be a part of your own development. You'll be able to actually put together a design proposal, which includes all the nitty gritty of like, what does it look like to put together a budget? What materials do you have to have? What does insurance look like and timelines look like? And then you'll be able to take all of those things and be able to, again, hopefully be set up for success as you move into fabrication, installation, and conservation of your artwork. And next slide. So like I said, the presenters for the workshops will be a pretty wide range of folks. We're developing it right now and I'm very excited. But there are artists, arts administrators, architects, design professionals, city staff. One of the other cool things too is that we've built and kept relationships with folks who were part of previous boot camps. So we always try and find ways to integrate them into the process too as new experts in this field of public art. So there will be opportunities to connect with previous boot campers as well. And the framework just outlines everything I talked about in the previous slide. But again, the boot camp is consisting of workshops, individual mentorship. There's public workshops that anyone can attend, and really importantly as well, networking opportunities. And you can hit the next slide, Jason. So digging a little deeper into what the primary schedule will look like I said, really the curriculum is built to both help you build your own understanding of the life cycle of a public art project, but we also, as we're moving through the curriculum, are thinking really intentionally around how you're being set up for success and developing your own temporary commission. So if you look, the October through about December curriculum is really about talking with folks who are really experienced in, the preliminary steps of a public art project. So what does it look like to do community engagement? What questions should you ask when you're on a site visit? How do I develop a concept and translate it to folks who, are part of construction sites and city review bodies who may not be or have a primary interest in art, but need to know these details in order to help you be successful. The mid part of the project, so December through about February and March, is really, again, speaking with folks who, artists who have experience designing concepts. It's about what does it look like to have other folks review your proposals? What does it look like to be able to have those accountability measures as you're really finalizing your design? And then the last part of the project will really work with you to take all of these things and site, install, and fabricate a temporary commission. The expected time commitments are Saturday afternoons and Thursday evenings. So we did just want to note that on the front end as folks are planning and applying for this opportunity. Like I said, and Jason explained it a little bit as well, but a large part of this is really leaving the program with a temporary public art commission under your belt. So we have two projects that artists in this program typically work on. There's Art Interruptions, as Jason said, was a partnership between SDOT, and then Seattle Center Sculpture Walk, which is a partnership with Seattle Center. I personally work on Seattle Center, so if anyone gets selected and works on Seattle Center, we'll be working pretty deeply together. But I think what both of these sites have in common is that they're really great sites for you to get your feet wet in terms of what it looks like to do a temporary art commission. For both of these projects, we have really great relationships with community members, with city staff, and they love being a part of the process of creating temporary artworks for artists who may not have a lot of experience. So I'm actually working with a round of folks this round for Seattle Center, and I think it's going to be really cool. Again, a lot of emerging artists, and I think there's going to be this really interesting intersection of just different art forms. But Seattle Center are really great partners and making sure that regardless of their experience level, that they're set up for success. So we're doing things like meeting with them to review the current artist design concepts. We're meeting with the riggers who will be actually rigging the work, and making sure that everything in terms of installation points makes sense. So again, that's all to say we'll be there with you at every step of the process to make sure that you're set up for success. And you'll sort of see again on the side just that design concept timeline that I was explaining. And then sort of before I get into the actual application, I think really high level, the takeaway is that for a long time, public art has, as I'm sure a lot of you know, been really difficult to get into. It's really consisted of a lot of the same folks getting some of the same commissions. And for our office, this is a really great opportunity to, expand on our own networks and build our own resources of new folks who I think will really push the field of public art forward. So we're really excited to build that relationship with you. I think just in terms of the artists that I work with, there's always something that I take away with it. So I'm always really excited to build that individual relationship. So looking forward to that as well. We're hoping that, again, you can take away real tangible skills that you'll be able to, take to other calls and say that you've done like parts of this project before. We want to give you money because we know that your time is valuable and you should get paid for your work. And then we also want to give you, it says participation in selection of 2024 boot campers, but I think broader, we want to give you opportunities to see what it looks like when folks are selected for these calls so that you could be set up for success even more beyond this project. And listed below are the staff mentors, so myself, Maya, and Jeremy. Moving a little bit into the call, I'll toss it to Becky here in a few slides, but I'll just set it up a little bit. In terms of eligibility, the call is open to artists who are from Washington State. Unfortunately, if you have received a temporary or permanent public art commission over $5,000, you are ineligible. So please note that if you have received that. But really, as you're thinking about your own interests in participating in this program, we definitely encourage you to really consider, do you have an interest in exploring your own art practice and what that looks like in terms of its presentation in the public sphere? So that should include everything from really being open to community engagement, really being open to recognizing what site-specific artwork and feasibility looks like, and really being open to working together as we sort of develop our understanding of that. Um, you should also be, just as you're thinking about it, wondering, like, do you have a commitment and interest to balancing your own artistic creativity and vision while also balancing, you know, public processes and city processes, which oftentimes, again, can sort of get into the nitty gritty, but are necessary in the public art process. And then lastly, again, we're seeking new artists to the public art field. So we know that there are folks who historically have been underrepresented, communities of color, queer folks, even folks like mature artists who are really looking at how they enter into the field. So if you're one of these folks, or like anyone else as well, like please, please, please consider applying. Um, I think this is a really cool opportunity, and it's been really awesome just to see the ways in which we've seen folks who haven't been able to participate in this project. Moving into some of the more nitty gritty, again, we want you to get paid for your work. So looking at the broad budget of what this program's looking at, each artist who's selected will receive $11,800. This budget is broken down into two parts. So the first part are $200. This is a stipend for every workshop you attend, and it'll really add up to about $1,800 if you attend each workshop. And then the second one is going to be a $10,000 temporary artwork commission. So towards the end of the project, this is the budget that you'll be expected to work within as you're developing your temporary public artwork. The applications are due May 4th, so that's coming up soon. And like with time, COVID, time moves weird now. So we encourage folks just to apply early, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Moving into the application requirements, I have a couple more slides and then I'll hand it to Becky, but there's 5 portions of the application that you'll be expected to submit. The first 2 are really the written or audio video, letter of interest, and biographical statement. These 2 are built to replace the resume and cover letter. So in the past, we found that when folks just sort of list their experience and accomplishments, it is really difficult in helping us understand the why you're interested, as well as the who of who you are. So that's what those 2 pieces are. We have written or audio video supplemental questions. The questions are listed there, but I'll just read them. So what specifically interests you about the field of public art? How do your background and or life experiences inform your artwork? Is there anything specific you'd like to highlight or emphasize for the selection panel to pay close attention to within your application? And of the training content that's outlined as part of the description, what part do you feel are key to your advancement in the public art realm? / is there anything that you feel is missing? The last 2 are 4 to 8 past work samples. So a couple things about the work samples. These can be details of pieces, but we do ask that as you submit your work samples, please don't put compilations of multiple images in one picture. It gets really difficult to read for both the applicants and also, not the applicants, the panelists, as well as the arts folks on the end. So please only 1 image per work sample. And then the second part is, and again, Becky will walk you through this, but there's going to be an image identification list. So when you submit each work sample image, there will be sort of space for you to explain the attributions, but also space for you to explain a little more in detail around your own experience with the artwork and why you chose to put it for your work sample. A little bit too about the written or audio video format. So we, a few years ago, started accepting audio video format. The intent of this option is really to provide folks who feel like they can represent themselves verbally versus in writing, and or vice versa. So folks for whom English may be a second language and or need different accessibility considerations. If you choose to submit one or another, there's really no sort of pro or con, I'd say. Um, all application materials will be reviewed equally. It's really, again, just an opportunity for folks who feel like they can represent themselves better in one medium or another to provide that. If you do choose to submit your responses in the audio or video format, we do ask that you create one audio or video file. So your one audio or video file should include your letter of interest, biographical statement, supplemental questions. And you can take this and upload it to a sharing platform such as YouTube, Google Drive, Dropbox, anything that generates a link that you'll be able to paste into the application. And I know this is kind of like amorphous a little bit. Some people work better with visuals. So again, we'll walk through what the application looks like. But just a few last things about that. We're not asking for anything highly produced. So we're not looking for music or like your friends to hop in and explain why you're the most amazing artist. It's actually somewhat distracting, so please don't do that. But in terms of what we are looking for, focus on your message, focus on who you are. We want to get to know you and why you feel like you'd be a good participant in this project. A few other small tips, if you wanted to limit background and ambient noise and camera shakiness, I think, again, nothing overproduced, but that's always nice for the reviewers.
Rick, can you tell us how many minutes that audio application submission should be?
I believe it's different for each one. I will answer that at the question and answer because I realized we didn't put that in there. So I'll go into Submittable after this and I'll clarify that during the question and answer portion for folks. And then I think lastly, in terms of the selection process, so artists will be selected on the strength of the work samples, your statement of interest, and your additional supplemental questions. And the panelists who will be reviewing your application will be folks who were previous participants in the public art bootcamp process. So again, it's kind of that like full circle opportunity for folks to really get to understand what it looks like to participate in all processes. You should be notified by August. So if you do apply, keep an ear out by then. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, now we're going to take a deep dive into Submittable and what you can see when you go follow the link to how to apply and get to our call. This is the platform that we've been using for the last couple of years now, and we're actually very excited to still be using it. It's pretty user-friendly, but when you log in, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to ask you for some basic information. You do have to register and create an account to apply. But just, make sure you're applying for the right call as well with the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, Public Art Bootcamp 2022 to 2023. And again, it's very user-friendly, but, include your applicant name, your email address, your contact information. I highly recommend you put an email address that you want us to be reached at and you check regularly. It's very common that people put in, your website, email address, and then things get lost in translation and you don't check it that often. So make sure you put something that you check regularly, a phone number, as well as how you learned about that opportunity. We're really trying to track where and how you hear about these things. Eligibility, just make sure that you check that you do live here in Washington State. That is a requirement for the call. But again, super easy. Click as you go. Also make sure that you haven't had commissions over $5,000. Next slide. Your letter of interest and biographical statement. This will allow you to choose that written or that audio format. If you're doing the written, just make sure that you're also giving enough information about yourself and why you think your background and what you think would be best for this opportunity. Sell yourself, tell us why you're interested. But it's got a limited number of text characters. We highly recommend that you kind of do it outside of the system and then copy and paste in, just in case, software can be interesting as you go through and you don't want to lose any work. And then Ricky, I'm going to let you continue to kind of research how long those audio statements can be, because we don't have that in here either. But next slide. There are a few supplemental questions that we ask you to do throughout, and just please continue to work through those. Like, what does your background and your experience from your artwork tell us about that a little bit? Is there anything in your application you would like to highlight or emphasize for the selection panel? Again, information that would give us in the selection panel is information about you, that why you would be a good fit for our program. And based on what you know about public art, what information or experience would be key to advancing you in your public art practice? And again, this isn't trick questions. It's just really tell us why you would be a good fit and why you would be interested in, being part of this next cohort. Work samples, you'll be able to upload work samples. As Ricky said, please do not put more than one image on a work sample. It gets really hard for our panelists to review those and kind of discern what is what. So one work sample per file. For all of your work samples, we highly recommend that you add, all of the pertinent information. Title, the year it was created, the medium, a brief description. The brief description is an opportunity to sell yourself again, or explain why this specific piece is a good example of why you could be part of our program. What your role was in the project, especially if it was a team project, let us know what your role specifically was, and the rough commission amount. So we also have a section of demographic questions. This is for internal assessment only and not part of the selection nor our online roster. It is just information for us to kind of see who we've reached within our calls, and it's an internal data point for us. You're also not required to submit it if you do not wish to. Don't forget to click the terms of use. If you don't do that, it will not let you save or hit apply. So once you save your draft, save, and then hit apply at the end, make sure that you get that in before our deadline, which I believe is May 4th. And then we've got a couple slides here that just like kind of items of note and some tips. So apply early. Software issues do arise. If you do have issues, Submittable is a great resource and they respond quickly as well. Or our project manager, his information will be listed at the very last slide. If you have questions or concerns, we're here to help. So please use us if you need us. If there's image loading issues, that could be low internet speeds. Images can only be partially loaded. Double check this prior to clicking submit. Just double click your application and make sure all the images are there and that nothing is kind of half there. And if you have questions, reach out to us. Application tips. So we would really love for you to apply at least 24 hours prior to the call being closed. That way, in case something does happen, there are any snags, we can help you get over that hump so that you can get into the selection pool. Also, as I mentioned earlier, is like write your responses in Word or another format of that nature and copy and paste in. You can also use the word function to track your word count, because there is a limited word count for some of those text-based application sections. It's also a great idea to have someone that you trust to review all of your responses, looking for grammar or typos, just tricks of the trade. Have someone else also look at your work samples and those descriptions as well to make sure they make sense. This is also a very fast process. So we also have a large quantity of people that typically apply. So we usually only get 5 to 10 seconds to go through work samples. So make sure that everything's really easy to read and you've got, your images all together and look really great. And the ones typically at the beginning that are better are ones that you'd like to have seen first. Again, it's also very competitive. We get lots of applications specifically for this call. So apply, again, even if you don't get it this time, there's always more opportunities.
Okay, so now for this section of the workshop, we are just going to have like a roundtable discussion with our panelists here. So yeah, I think we probably get started. Our first question, or Ricky or Becky, which one do you want to take this on?
I can take this one.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe specifically, I think Becky and I will direct some questions to folks. and we'll open it up for a broader question and answer after for the audience. But yeah, maybe Pat or Hugo, what do you typically look for in an artist's submission material?
Sure, I can address that, and I'm actually going to address it a little more broadly and talk about submissions in general for public art opportunities, not just this boot camp, because I have I think everybody is here because they're interested in pursuing public art and pursuing opportunities, and I want to sort of give a little insight to that. The first thing that I would recommend that people do is really, when you're addressing a call or applying, is to make sure that you've read it very carefully. And when I say that, most calls will have information about the goals for that particular artwork, or who are the communities that are being served, or what is it that they're looking for that artwork to accomplish, whether it's to be at a health center and have a calming effect, or whether it's something that's, has lyrical, it's going to be in a park, or whatever it is. Be very, very cognizant of that when you are selecting your works and your submission materials. I would say, if I were to break it down in sort of a general way, but I think it can be applied pretty much across the board, is the first one is the quality of the work that you've done in the past. And when I say the quality of work is, is the aesthetic quality, is the work, for whatever the work is it technically well executed? Is there originality in your concepts? Is it evoking a response? How refined are the ideas? Is there a focus of work? Is there a body of work you've been doing? What are your interests? I mean, it's very important that you are able to convey that in your selection of images, and that image selection is really of paramount importance. The other thing that I would say, and when I mention being very cognizant of the goals of the particular call, is in your selection, in the way you write a narrative, or in this case, they allow you to do a video, which is actually the first time I've ever heard of that ever. So kudos to you for doing that, honestly. But you want to convey how your background, pursuits, and the work that you've been doing and your interests, how they're in alignment with the goals of that particular call. Because you can be having very strong work that you're presenting, and you can talk about your work and your interests, but if those works have no relationship to what it is that call is asking for, that's going to be a bigger reach for those panelists who are going to need to be selecting artists to go into. Generally, it's going to be a second stage, because usually in these calls for artists, there's a first stage, which is to look at the background qualifications and background work the work artist has already completed. And then generally, the next step is going to be to select some finalists that would actually create a proposal. That's sort of a standard process that most calls that you encounter are going to follow. So I think looking in those two general areas, the quality of that past work that you're doing, and then also seeing that the interests and background are in alignment with the goals. I would say those are two big things that are overall going to be important to convey.
I can definitely confirm that all of that makes a lot of sense, and the whole world of public art, and pretty much in the art world, galleries and all other venues. Because I was part of boot camp, I can speak more directly to what it is that I would look for in the boot camp's artist material, because a lot of the people that I met while I was there were in expressing themselves in ways that you wouldn't generally connect to public art. A lot of just a huge variety. There were several people that were already in the sort of fine art, milieu, but there were also folks that were in very disparate types of expression. So what I would look for in that sorry about that, in that world would be to be able to connect in just clarity. I mean, good photographs of the work, the best that you can supply. Is, for the obvious reason, I have to be able to see what you're doing very clearly, because the work, to be able to see the craft, the level of craft, because I may not be familiar with that type of expression. I may not be that well connected to jewelry making or puppetry or whatever it is that you're doing. So the photographs will give me that level of clarity. Also in the writing, I like the writing. I look for the writing to be clear, and not. We're all sort of like very emotional and dramatic, and artists, and so there's a lot of material that gets a little esoteric, and so I like the material to be very clear, and focused on a job, which is basically what you're applying for, so very basic information. Also, honesty. I think when you start to talk about the reasons why when we ask you things that are kind of personal, I mean, which you might or might not consider very delicate, depending on who you are. To be honest, and because the people, what Ricky said a few times, is that everybody involved is set up, is committed and really interested in setting you up for success, and that I can attest to that. And the people that I have met in public art are definitely committed to that, and they're patient and they're kind and they're supportive. And so for many of us coming into this field, from outside, it's frightening. I mean, even me, I'm at the age that I began to reach out to public arts. It's not an easy. I mean, you have to be very confident. It's just kind of like, jump in here. But the people involved only want the best for you. So yeah, I think that the submission material has to be clarity of the images as much as you can, and clarity in the writing, and do speak about yourself. I think that that connects you to public art is generally, something that you're sharing with the community. So whatever you think is, I talk about my social and political beliefs when I apply to things. I think people are really interested in hearing where you're standing, as a member of the community, as a citizen, when you're going to put your artwork out there. Yeah, that's I think what I can add to that.
Thank you, Hugo. So our next question: How has Public Art Bootcamp helped with you? How has Public Art Bootcamp helped you with how you approach an application for a project? And Sabina, I'd like you to get us started with that one.
Sure. So having done public art boot camp, there were a couple of things that, became really important about the application process, being really specific about what the goals are, like Pat mentioned about the project. The one thing that I learned from Maya, and also from talking to managers at the Washington Public Art, is calling up the project manager. Like I just did that for a call that I just submitted in Oregon. And the call was very broad and I was having a hard time figuring out what they actually wanted. Sometimes when you look at these public art calls, they're like, we want something about ecology, we want something about nature. And I'm like, that's really huge. So I called the project manager, and I think this is really important that you don't see that often in these type of discussions is, and I set up a meeting with her and I sent her my statement of interest that I'd already put together for Oregon. I said, look, I would like to apply to this, but I want more information. Can you provide specificity about the panelists? What are they looking for? What have been the existing discussions about what kind of art they want on that site? That was so informative. She talked to me about how they were thinking about doing an artist residency because these are a bunch of state agencies that are going to be located in this building that's being remodeled. So she's like, they didn't put it in the application because they didn't want to commit to like a year-long residency. But if you have experience with community engagement, experience with already done a public art residency with the Portland Archives, put that experience in there. So I got individualized feedback, which should help me enormously. So oftentimes, like after I finished with that, initial interview with the project with Seattle Shoreline College, I called up and I said, how did I do? And he's like, I thought you knocked it out of the park, but this is the feedback we got from the group, right? So I think what I learned from boot camp is not only just writing the application and all the things that Pat talked about earlier, but also getting that individualized feedback and not being afraid to ask for that. And that is something unique about the boot camp, that you get to meet so many people and you network with them. You get comfortable with asking specific questions to help support a more specific application and a more specific selection of images to go with the specific project that you're applying for. So that would be my little bit of feedback.
Thank you, Sabina.
Yeah. I that's a really good approach, Sabina, because I had never thought of actually contacting the folks involved in the process to get more clarity. Which for me, it's usually about where this project is going to be executed, because a lot of the projects that are done in public art like to and should draw from the history and the history mainly, of the area. And so I'm not from here. I'm from the East Coast, where they don't have boot camp. And so for me, luckily, I like to do research. So for me, when I feel at a loss about what to speak about in that community, then I just do research, which I enjoy. But I like the idea of contacting the folks involved and getting more clarity from them. The how boot camp also has directly affected it is to put more work into the application. It's really I think it gave me confidence, in approaching an application, which in turn made me be more conscientious about putting more work into it. As an artist, I'm generally only interested in putting work into what I'm interested in, like really immediately, in an immediate basis. So go, doing this sort of, this paperwork, it took me a while to get to the point to be sure that I crossed every T and dotted every I, and to review it and to have other people's review it, like one of the last points that were made in the presentation about the applications. It really just gave me a lot of confidence, you know, on submitting, you know, applications for things that were even, I thought were even beyond my scope of experience. Well, they were beyond my scope of experience, but you know, I had the confidence to. It gave me the confidence to think that I could apply my life experience, which, yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Cool. And I'm noticing we have a lot of questions coming in through the chat. And I want to leave some time for that. So maybe let's do one more. I might ask this one to Pat. And again, I think, yeah, we definitely want to get to some questions in the chat. So maybe wrapping it up. Pat, what are some common missteps that you see when reviewing applications?
I'm glad to have this one. I think, you know, sort of going back to the selection of your images and the way that you handle the narratives is so important. I think what happens sometimes in a call is that an artist may not have a good self-critical eye in the selection of their work. And it is really important that you are putting work out there that is resolved in as much as possible. And what I mean is, I've seen calls and applications come in where an artist will make a selection and maybe they've been working in one medium or with one concept for a while, and it's very well resolved. The work is very technically executed. And then they're maybe have, oh, well, I also have this interest in doing these sketches. And then they put these sketches in, and perhaps those sketches are in a very sort of early stage of development, and they're not as strong as this other work. And that is an interesting sort of thing to think about, because what happens as a panelist who may not be familiar with your work is they're seeing work that's uneven in quality. And it's also in some ways, you know, and it kind of depends, but these are things to think about. It could be then that they're wondering, well, this artist is putting all this in as if it's their best work. That tells us as a panelist that maybe this artist isn't able to look at their work in this critical manner. And then if I select this person, what kinds of, you know, am I going to get work that's of this resolved quality of this group of images, or is it going to be something like what's happening in this other group of images? So that's a sort of a convoluted way of talking about it, but it's very important that you select work that is going to best represent your abilities in the artwork. The other thing is that you are tailoring your narratives, your conversation about your work to reflect what that call's looking for. We have had calls, or I've seen calls, where an artist has a very specific interest, and that's very refined, that focus, that interest, that's what they want to do. And it doesn't leave room for the community engagement to alter that perception, or maybe it may be that that part of that call, or generally more and more these artworks that we're looking to see that there is some sort of connection to the community. Maybe there's more of a process in the development of the final design. And so you want to be able to convey that you're open to having that conversation in the refinement or in the design ultimately of the artwork that's going to come from this commission. If you're somebody who says, you know, I just do this thing and I do it all these different ways and I'm interested in this, well, if a panel thinks, okay, but we don't necessarily want that. We want, you know, we have great skills, you have great skill, you know, some interesting concepts in pursuing this idea, but we're kind of looking a little bit over here, and you don't seem to be showing that you're going to be open to sort of cross over to where the goals, to meet the goals of the project. That's not going to be something that a panel, you know, is going to jump at taking a chance on. So you really, I think, conveying the fact that you are open to this community engagement, you have these interests, you have this technical skill, and you're also very happy and open to this idea of working with the community and adjusting and refining your ideas to fit this, because that's, I think, is something just to understand, particularly when you're new in public art, is you may be used to creating work in your bubble, in your studio, and it's on the gallery and it's your work, and you know, that's it. But in public art, it's not like that. It's something that you want, obviously, the community to embrace, and you want it to have it serves a broader purpose. And so you need to walk into it and convey that you are in alignment with that. So that would be my thoughts there.
Thanks, Pat. And so I'm reviewing the chat and I'm seeing maybe a couple of themes of questions. So I'm thinking maybe Becky and Jason, I can ask both the group and even both of you sort of the themes that I'm seeing, and we can sort of get to that if that sounds good to folks. Cool. So the first one's a bit quicker. I'll probably direct this to Jason and Becky, but there's a lot of questions around Office of Arts and Culture staff and whether we can review applications, as well as how, I guess, we as project managers would, I guess, like to be approached just when folks have questions about reviewing applications and what they should submit, etc.
I can jump in, Ricky. We typically do not review applications in advance, like before you hit apply. But if you do have questions, like Sabina had mentioned, please reach out to us. I kind of, I was the point person last time around, and I got a lot of questions about like, what are you looking for with the statement of interest and things of that nature? Or, hey, I've got a ton of work and I don't know how to kind of express myself in this like 300 character line, you know, bubble. Feel free to reach out and we can help you and kind of give you some tips or some suggestions of how to address that. But we can't just review everyone's applications. This is a heavy lift for our department and for our team, but we're happy to answer any questions that you may have to help curate what those answers will be for your application.
Yeah, I think we can probably comment on your approach of what you're doing and sort of saying, you know, I tend to see panelists kind of pull away when they read this, so maybe don't talk about that, maybe talk about this. So I think just kind of, you know, you can run ideas past us and we can kind of give you some of our some recommendations on how to sort of, you know, address a panel. Another one in there I saw was giving feedback on proposal before submission. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that we're not looking for proposals at this time. That we're basing all this selection on past experience, all your qualifications. The proposal part will happen as part of the bootcamp programming. So a few months in, we'll start working with stakeholders to work so that you can kind of get all the information to develop your ideas. But at this point, we're not looking for proposals. And one of the things about when you're applying for a project, you really want to know if it's a request for proposals, an RFP, or a request for qualifications, RFQ. If it's an RFQ, you don't want to put in proposals. From experience of 99%, applications are DOA if there's a proposal in there, because a panelist is going to say, I don't like this idea. And if they think that you are married to that idea, then they're just you're going to be dismissed. So if it is just qualifications, just put in qualifications. And you can talk broadly maybe about your themes or ideas about your project, what it could be, as long as it reflects the scope of what they're asking, but always just be really careful about putting proposals that are unsolicited. I don't know, Becky or Ricky, you want to talk about one for audio recording incorporated into the work?
Sure. Wait, what was the question about the audio recording?
Can audio recording be incorporated into public installations?
I'll talk that to Becky maybe, since I don't know. Have you seen audio recordings be involved in your public artworks for art interruptions?
Not for these temporary projects, but overall, like overarching public art, like long-term program projects, there are sometimes opportunities to have sound installations kind of included, some sort of audio included. But we have also been seeing artists like work with podcasts and do like QR codes and be able to like, you know, connect into somewhere where you can listen to different things at this point as we kind of move into this digital world of seeing art in different places. So I think yes, but it would be vetted through any of our normal processes for a public art project or specifically one of our temporary programs that we're looking at.
Yeah, so I think about, you know, is your project dependent on the audio? Because if it fails or if it gets stolen, is your artwork now gone? I know that we have years ago in art interruptions, like an artist had, you know, they set up sessions for these weekly jams of people putting together mixtapes. And so they had a boom box, but they would bring the boom box with them and have the event. So think about, you know, everything about the theft issues or just damage from the weather or vandalism to, yeah, whether it's dependent, and sort of think of creative ways to weave that into your work. Maybe a question for Pat, Hugo. There's one. As a fiber artist, I have issues conveying texture and scale through photography. Do you have any advice? I think so that you could think about, like, you know, who is on a panel and what we're looking at, and, you know, how, if, you know, when you're seeing things, like how you're able to translate like what you're seeing in front of you into like into an understanding of what it is.
I would say a couple things just about the quality. And, you know, we say quality of images, but not only should they be clear, I think they should be well framed. I think that you would want to consider maybe a couple of details that would be able to show actually what's going on with this fiber work. You know, is it crochet? Is it whatever it is, to show the texture, to show, you know, what exactly is going on. I would say, it may be, if this is something that you're serious about, I would really consider approaching, maybe you have a friend who's a photographer, or you can find a photographer to get a set of photographs of your work that is just documented, clear, that would show that work in its entirety, and maybe even, you know, with one or two backup shots that would show it in context, so you get a sense of the size of the work, and then good details. I've seen really great photography with fiber. I wouldn't be afraid of photography if you're a fiber artist. I think that some of the really interesting images are actually a fiber work, because especially if you get those detailed, there's that 3D perspective, you can get the sense of the texture. It really, you shouldn't be afraid of photography, honestly, if you're a fiber artist.
And to piggyback on to Pat's really quickly, is use that description area within your image, underneath your image, to convey that this is a detailed shot of the larger image that I already submitted. So your panelists can really make those connections to understand what you're trying to convey to them. They can't follow the images unless you give them that information to do so.
Yeah, I agree with Pat. I would even go further and say that, you know, it's really hard to spend money on documenting the work. It just never feels right for me, but it's really necessary. And the sooner that those of you that haven't been doing work at that level, the easier we get used to it. You know, if you can't do it yourself, or you find it difficult to do it yourself, that is money well spent. And even writers is sometimes, that's also money well spent. And as an artist, because a lot of us are really, that's not our forte. You know, writing about our art is difficult, and photography, you know, you have to have the equipment, you have to have, you know, to get really great professional photos. But I think at this level, you know, just clarity. And I mean, I saw your question. It really stuck out to me. But like Pat said, you know, you will get, you know, really good photos of fiber art. You know, it is possible I've seen it, and you'll get it.
Also, too, recognizing that, you know, paying for photography is expensive. I would say if you feel like you can't do that, like reach out to a friend or a family member and see and ask them what the images that you're asking to select, I guess, say to them. And I feel like that might give you a good gauge of, oh, if, you know, I'm hoping to convey X, Y, and Z, but my family member is saying that they're reading ABC, maybe I should, you know, adjust. And additionally, too, as Becky said, definitely using the details that you're able to fill in with each image. There is a text requirement, I guess, up to a specific amount of words that I believe is listed as you put those in. Someone had a question about that, so I think those are two other options as well too. But yeah, the panelists really do love when folks add those details of why you selected a piece, why you feel like it represents the work, and why you feel like it would support, I guess, representing you as a successful artist in this program.
We have another question about, will there be opportunities to transition into new mediums for the public installation? Absolutely. You know, and we'll work with the staff, but I think maybe Sabina, you want to talk about again, like, you know, for you, like your experience with boot camp of moving into, you know, 3D sculpture in a public setting.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities to do that and to translate your two-dimensional work into a three-dimensional space. I mean, there was, I'd say 90% of my cohort members were working from a 2D perspective. There was maybe 2 or 3 artists that identified as sculptors, but most of us were working with our work as painters, and so I had done some laser cut work before, and so I kind of translated that, but I had to make it stand upright. I had to make a triangle, which is a lot harder than you think. Like the angles have to be worked with a cabinet maker. So there were things that I had to learn about fabrication. And I think what's amazing about where we're at now with public art in 2022 is all the digital fabrication that we can do. I mean, from 3D printing to all that stuff. So it's really opened up and democratized, in a sense, the field of public art. And I think a lot of people who may not have, you know, learned welding or learned how to do cast wax bronze sculpture, which I did one class, you know, back in, you know, 18 years ago. If you don't have that skill set, you can work with people and other fabricators to do that. And the question around working with other professionals, professional photographers, videographers, and like I said, I worked with a city engineer. You can trade, you can ask for favors, you can dial those things in. I mean, I've been making art for many years and I have a very small budget most of the time. So it's really about, you know, working with other community members in your field that maybe you have a friend who's a professional photographer, but they can do you a favor and then you can do them a favor. So photography and picking those slides out for this application are going to be key. And the other thing that I don't think got mentioned specifically for this call, I looked at my application, it's they really want to see who you are as an artist and what your connection is to public art. So making sure you make that connection of like, this is my work and these are my themes and these are my interests in this year-long thing. So like the more specific you can see yourself doing this 1-year internship in a sense, I think will make sense. And what are your individualized strengths? Like I highlighted my community engagement because that was my individual strength. Yours might be something totally different, as was each person who was in this camp with me. They all had individual strengths that they brought to bear. So really describing that is going to make you be selected, I think. I don't know if that's and accurate. That's my perspective. Jason and Rebecca, do you think that's a good idea to highlight your specific strengths?
I think it's a job application, like most any of these things. So why are you a good fit for this? Not why we think you're a good fit for this, but tell us why you want to be doing this and what you could bring to the table and what you could get out of it. And that really goes a long way with our panelists.
The other thing that Rebecca said is make sure you put in your application, why now? Why is this important to you now? Like, why are you interested in this? If you can also make that case for your application, like, hey, I've been doing these temporary things and I'm really at the edge of doing public art and I need this experience and it's COVID and I want to work outdoors. Like, if you can give 3 reasons about why now, that's a really good way to persuade your panelists.
I think that bleeds into another question we have about, an artist applicant who wants to delve into 3D work, but all their samples are 2D and digital work. So I think, again, like what Sabina is saying, really sell yourself and really work in your application to really get that across to the panel. Because I think, earlier on when we looked at some of the Lake City images, we had an artist there, Basso, who was a 2D artist and he made 3D forms. So, we have no expectations of what you're going to do. I mean, we've had 2D artists in this cohort who made 2D artwork. So you don't have to do a 3-dimensional object, freestanding object. You can do 2-dimensional work. You can do augmented reality. So I think don't let that limit you. We're looking for ideas, not a thing. So just sort of keep that in mind as you're going through your applications. Ricky and Becky, I don't know if you wanted to talk about, we had a question about the communities and the geographic areas. So you want to talk about, for art interruptions in Beacon Hill and then Seattle Center as well.
Totally. I can take Seattle Center. So I've worked for the past couple of years with Seattle Center, and I think one of the interesting opportunities is that, as I'm sure most of us know, it's been under construction for the past few years due to Climate Pledge Arena. So at least one thing that I noticed is with the last round of artists whose artwork just went up, there's a lot of considerations around what does it mean to create artwork that's feasible for a site where there's like lifts running through constantly, where there's consistent changes to the landscape, and where you have to have really deep communication between Seattle Center as a site to make sure that things don't happen, such as accidentally moving your artwork, or if they need to like cut a fence, they don't cut in between your artwork. So that's been a really interesting opportunity at Seattle Center. I think the other, I guess, like broader methodological, like interesting opportunity is there's really this big identity change happening at Seattle Center with the addition of Climate Pledge Arena. So with that, as I'm working with artists for this next and upcoming round, there's been a lot of questions such as like, how do we welcome our new neighbors? There's a Skate Like a Girl who moved in across the street. So is there opportunities with one artist that I'm working with to partner with Skate Like a Girl to really build and create a 2D work that would welcome them to the space? There's a whole host of really interesting new opportunities popping up that I think are allowing for really cool and interesting connections that there weren't. So yeah, that'll all be a part of, I think, really the concept design proposal aspect of things, the site visit aspect when you really get to go on site and meet the Seattle Center staff, meet the folks who will be putting up your work, possibly meet the folks who, again, are surrounding neighbors within that really active community. But yeah, Seattle Center is awesome. There's going to be a really cool host of works, little plug, that are up now, but also coming up in August. So if you're interested, would be cool to see what folks are doing. But yeah.
And for art interruptions for this cohort, they'll be in Beacon Hill. So it's much more of a neighborhood project versus Seattle Center, which is very much, large venue with people coming from all over the city, all over the country for different reasons and, stumbling across the artwork. The art interruptions pieces are really intended to be kind of moments of surprise, humor, things to stumble across in a community setting along our neighborhood greenways with our partners with the Seattle Department of Transportation. And so we'll be looking at right-of-way and looking at opportunities within that right-of-way to how we can put in artwork along those pathways. And hopefully at the end, we end up with a small like walking tour that we can give to the public, and those installations stay up for about a year.
And then we have another technical question about the application about ability to submit video as their work samples. And I believe we don't have that ability, right?
I don't believe we do. I believe it's only photographs or a single file image.
Yeah, so maybe, you know, I don't know if you're somehow weaving that into your presentation.
I think you could add a link within the description text if you needed to, that if we could ask panelists to go to it, it would be an extra step. So it wouldn't be quite as obvious. So if you had like a screenshot or a still image of whatever that artwork is, and you wanted to submit and embed a video link, that would be the way to do it for someone to see a video.
We got through the questions from our attendees, and we are at about 12:26, so we have a few minutes left. So I don't know, maybe go through our panelists and see if they each have, you know, one little nugget to give to, you know, the folks who are here, like, you know, any last sort of parting tip or recommendation that you would want to convey to them. Sabina, you want to start?
I don't know if this was clear, but I actually live in Portland, Oregon. So I don't know how many folks here are on the call from Oregon or from Portland. This is open to you all to go ahead and apply. I think it's an amazing opportunity. I would just stress again, highlighting, I had all my images were 2D images, but a lot of my two-dimensional work is kind of an experiential three-dimensional installation. So I make 2D stuff and hang them in three-dimensional spaces, and I just photographed that. I had video projections. I didn't send the videos, but I send images of the projections. And I highlighted my experience working with community. And even though we were on Zoom, I was able to connect with community. Even though I live in another state, I was able to make a lot of connections. And I got people's digits. I have still in touch with people, and they give me updates about my sculpture and how everything's going. And, you know, the neighborhood is taking care of it. Hopefully, fingers crossed. No graffiti so far. We're almost 8 months in. So I just encourage everyone to apply. And if you have more questions for me, just put them in the chat and I'll respond. Good luck.
Hugo, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an amazing opportunity. It does not exist that I know in many places in the country. It really is a great model. I do have a little bit of, you know, sadness that the larger format was done away with. But I think that because it's just opened it up to so many more people, and I think if it gets included in, you know, on more of a, you have the public attendance now. But anyway, that's an aside. To all of those, you know, here, thank you for coming, and really, it's a great opportunity to get your feet, you know, your toe in the water, you know. It's a, and like like it was written in one of the slides earlier on, if you don't get it this year, keep applying, you know, just keep applying. Yeah.
Thanks, Hugo. And Pat, any parting tips?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, for this opportunity or any opportunity, if you're looking to stretch your work or stretch your experience into public art, and maybe you haven't had that experience in the past, I think that it is important to just convey, you know, how you see your work, you know, how you would be interested in exploring that transition of your work into this other kind of space, and how you might see that. Somebody mentioned that they do 2D work and maybe they're interested in 3D work. So I would say convey that and say, you know, I'm doing this work, but I can see how it could be translated, my ideas, into this other kind of medium, and it could work so well. But, you know, just say, I have an interest. I wouldn't say, I want to do X, because again, you know, you don't want to convey that you just want to do this one thing. You're in a box and you're not going to take the information and develop from that. But I think conveying your interest in your work and seeing how your work can grow in this other realm, I think it is very exciting. I think that would be good, because overall, whenever you're responding to a call, the less guesswork that you are going to make the panelists do, the better. The more that the panelists can have comfort in understanding who the artist is, where the artist, what they're thinking about, what their interests are, what their work is, the better. Because, you know, all panels are different, but some can get very skittish because they're like, well, this is a leap, and I'm not sure that's what the artist is thinking, but I think that this could go over there and you know, be very successful, but I'm not quite sure that the artist is with me. So you want to just, you know, really convey what you're thinking.
Great, thanks. And I guess there was one more question that somebody asked I forgot to bring up. Any sort of other background besides art that hoping for people to demonstrate? It's like, of course, certainly. I mean, life experience is always a great thing. I mean, your work is going to be out in the community, so you want to communicate with folks. You want people to engage with your work. And so, you know, things like the obvious of community activism or community engagement, if you have experience, if you have teaching, if you have performance, if you're a bike activist, I mean, there are all these things that we can weave into, you know, have your art and have your passion and see how you can have this sort of marriage of that with the public. So definitely, you know, speak to who you are and what you do and why you're going to bring something really amazing to the public. So, and so with that, I want to thank you all for joining us today for this workshop. And I want to thank our guests, Pat Gomez, Sabina Haque, and Hugo Moro, for taking the time and sharing their wisdom and experience with everybody here. And just for everybody in the audience to know that, you know, definitely call the project managers, you know, always definitely reach out to us. We're always happy to chat and answer any questions you might have. Jeremy Beliveau specifically is working on the selection part of this on our team, but, you know, we're all responding to questions. So, I mean, if it's not Jeremy, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Rebecca or Ricky. And also that this workshop is being recorded and will be on our YouTube channel later next week. And yeah, and this is all, you know, COVID has sort of taught us that, you know, hey, these online workshops are actually really valuable. And so, you know, even if you don't get selected for the boot camp, and, you know, even though we have, you know, unfortunately, we are limiting it to 12, we are doing these public workshops as part of that whole bootcamp experience, so that even if you're not in that cohort, you're still getting some of the knowledge, some of that information that our boot campers are getting. And so on our bootcamp channel, on our YouTube channel, we are collecting more and more videos just to kind of give more information and tips about certain aspects within public art. So please definitely check out our channel, and yeah, always apply to our projects, even without boot camp. A lot of our smaller temporary projects, we are here to help you learn and learn the ins and outs of public art. So always, you know, use us as a resource. And again, so we hope to hear from you soon. I want to thank you all. I want to thank my colleagues, Ricky and Rebecca, for joining me and everybody else here today. So, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon and weekend. Bye-bye.